Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back, and we are loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. This is the 4th edition, and I'm loving doing it. My guest is Wayne Unger of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network and real estate fame from Florida. Wayne Unger, how are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, Ralph. Thank you. How about yourself?
I can't complain. For an old guy, just doing quite well. Let me tell you, and don't think I'm not appreciative of the fact that time marches on, and only a few of us get to experience old age when you compare it. It's a first generation, maybe second generation. People didn't live into their 70s up until very recently. So of all the people who have been alive, I'm in the top 5% of survivors, and I'm grateful for it. I get to share memories with of not only my childhood, but my guest childhood. And with that in mind, what was it like for you being a 12-year-old and subject to learning about baseball? And where were you? You're an avid baseball fan now. Where were you, and what contributed to it when you were 12?
Well, okay. So, first of all, by the time I hit 12, I was, I think I was like well on my way to shedding most of my innocence. So that wouldn't apply to me. And it's funny. So when you said, when you said where I was when I was 12, I was starting the 7th grade, because my birthday is in November. So it was like I became 12 2 months into the 7th grade. And the 7th grade, how if you remember, you go to middle school, and back then we started middle school in 7th grade. Nowadays it seems to be standard for 6th grade, but it was for me.
And you were Joseph Pulitzer 145 in Jackson Heights, Queens.
Yes. So so for me and my close friends, it was all about the girls. So,
okay.
So I tell you, I'd be hard pressed to remember if at the age of 12 I went to more than a couple of games, and that would have been in in the following year when I was turning 13. But back then, New York City had so many newspapers, and my father used to bring home the Post every day, and you might be able to identify this because your father also worked on 47th Street. So when you're getting on the subway, when you're walking down 47th Street on the south side, okay, so if you're walking in the direction of traffic on the left side of the street, right before the subway was a newsstand, and the guy there, his name was Willie.
Like a kiosk.
Yeah, yes, and the guy there, his name was Willie, and he knew all his customers, and he had the papers folded up in he was. I tell you what, this guy probably should have been a center if he was bigger, because the way he handed off the papers, he had them folded and he just stuck it right under his customer's arms and took the money. It was like, so you can just imagine he probably would have been, a natural for handing off the football to the quarterback. So, but
a quarterback like an Eddie, and a slick quarterback like an Eddie LeBaron. I don't know if you remember him.
He was a little before my time. Just a little before my time. But,
Okay.
so now, and the reason I know this is because once in a while I would go to the city and I'd meet my father for lunch and I would hang out and wait till he went home. But my father, but again, most days I was home and my father always came home with the New York Post, and we used to get papers in the evening. They used to come when I was much younger. It was the Daily News and the New York Mirror, or was it the Daily Mirror? I forget. And then the Mirror went out of business, and it was just the Daily News coming in at night. And so like at 8:30 at night, they used to bring up another paper. And so
that was meant for the next morning. That was an early edition of the next morning.
Right. So, I understand, but you know what? I used to get up and drag my butt out of bed and just get myself together, and it was like out the door to school. There was no time for me to read the paper in the morning. But because I would want, when you're a kid, you want to sleep as long as you can before you have to get out of bed. Nonetheless, so I read 2 newspapers every day, and I usually would try to read the papers cover to cover, but I certainly read the sports pages cover to cover. And, and I always, besides checking the box scores, back then, every day, they would not put the league leaders in. I don't know if you remember that. And during the week, it would be a short box, like an abbreviated box of the league leaders. On Sunday, they'd have a much more extended one.
Oh, Sunday was great. They'd have every player. Who were the sports writers that influenced you at a very early age? Because you've become a baseball maven, I have to say.
I'll be honest with you. At the age of 12, I can't say I would read something like I can read today, or even read something like I can read in my 20s. So, I thought Dick Young was great. I thought Phil Pepe was great. I'll tell you who I liked. And he's not a baseball writer, but he used to cover the Nets back in the day, Phil Mushnick. I used to like reading Phil Mushnick. And who was, there was I'm trying to remember who there was. There was that guy I forgot who it was who wrote for the Post. I think he had a beard. I can't remember his name. The times we would get on Sunday, and that was mostly Murray Chass, who ended up becoming a really grouchy old man, so I can't, I would read it and I would just buy into the fluff, pretty much whatever they wrote. Yeah. Okay. I loved Bill Gallo's cartoons. Remember Bill Gallo? He did the best sports cartoons.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so in later years, though, I would read columns, and I'm saying like when I'm in my 20s, and I'd be reading a sports column of any kind, and I'd be like, that's when I started to say, "Are you kidding me? Get out of here!" One particular guy who. I feel as though I saw right through him. I consider him, a very smug, pompous writer, is Mike Lupica. And I think I've expressed my disdain for Mike Lupica before. I think, somehow, one time, and this had to be years ago, but I believe I pretty much said, F Mike Lupica, pretty much, he was, and I'll tell you why. You can tell he did not like the Yankees, and so it's one thing, and if he didn't like you in general, if it was any ball player, any manager, any owner he did not like, he never let it go, and he would always find a way to take a shot at them, and I didn't like that, and he did it in a very smug, pompous way, but he was very successful, and he was a very powerful. He was a very influential voice in in sports writing, but not to me, but he was. So a lot of them just turned out, you reading them, a lot of them you realized they're just a lot of fluff. So it was like outside columnists that I would see in other publications that like grabbed my eye. What's his name? I can't believe Jason Stark. He wrote. He was I think with the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he used to do a column for Baseball America. And I used to actually, his column was the back cover, and I used to read the back cover first. I used to read his column first, not the back cover, but the back inside page. Jason Stark, and then I can't believe I'm having such brain farts here. But
well, you had Jimmy Breslin too.
But Breslin was not really a sports writer, and when he did write about sports, Breslin was a gifted writer in general, and he kind of like, so when he wrote about sports, he wasn't right, it wasn't really, it was more about romanticizing it as opposed to analyzing it and, dissecting the plays or the numbers or, the strategy and things like that. He would write about it in a romanticizing way. Not that it wasn't entertaining, but it was, like I say, he wasn't a sports writer. He was a fantastic writer that sometimes he would drift into sports, so to speak. So
right. And there were some sports writers that were sports writers who would drift into life. And I'm trying to think. One would be Leonard Coppett, who would make
and he was analogies. Yes. And he was with the Post. Yes.
Yes. And there was another Post writer named Leonard who wrote a column, as did Leonard Coppett. His name was Leonard Schechter. And Leonard Schechter was the editor for Jim Bouton with Ball 4. And the combination of those two, Schechter and Coppett, in the Post in the afternoon were delightful because Schechter would get more into the humanity of the sport or sports. He wrote a book called, in addition to really writing, transcribing, much like George Grimm transcribes my babble, he transcribed Bouton's, not babble, but Bouton's prose into a great book. He wrote on his own, he wrote Jocks, a book called Jocks. If you want to look that up, anybody, I'm sure it's on eBay. You can get a lot from Jocks.
You know what? That book sounds very familiar, and it's quite possible that I actually read that book.
It features a Casey Stengel story or two. It features Rod Keneal, talking about Rod Keneal. And just basically, it was one of those things that broke my, my innocence, so to speak. And that was a great book. I'm a tad older than you, so my innocence was broken a tad before you. But at 12, it was all baseball for me. At 14, it was all little girls. But
okay. And so also when I was 12, the Knicks were also starting to they were still a year away from starting to evolve. They were. Actually, I take that back. So no, that was a couple of years later. That was a couple of years later.
I remember those times. They had one of the Van Arsdales and Bellamy and what have you. They were a step away from getting to Busher and really going over the hump, so to speak, to be a championship contender.
Yeah, I think they had just drafted Willis Reed, and then they drafted Frazier.
They had Bad News Barnes.
No, they did not. That was the Nets. They did not have Marvin Barnes. I think Marvin Barnes started out in the ABA with, I believe, with either St. Louis or Memphis. Marvin Barnes, yeah, but they also
there was another big forward that they had that they had to get rid of in order to make Willis Reed a center and DeBusschere strong forward.
It was Bellamy. It was Bellamy who they traded for. They traded Bellamy and somebody else for DeBusschere.
It was Comives. It was Bellamy and Comives.
Okay, there you go. And they got so it was Bellamy who they traded to make room for Reed at center. And don't forget, and they also drafted Bill Bradley and waited for him 2 years to go to Oxford.
Right. It wasn't 2, it was 1, but it was a big one, which gave Dave Stallworth a chance to take over at small forward. And when Bradley got back, they became incredibly deep. They had a bench, and they got Barnett, and it was good times to be both a Met fan and even a Yankee fan, because
actually they had Cazzie Russell.
Right.
Who did I say? Dave Stallworth. You said Stallworth. So Stallworth, actually, he had some kind of heart problem, and he was out for almost a year, but he did come back.
Came back from that. That was very inspirational. Right.
Yes.
And they had Phil Jackson up front.
The Yankees were horrible then. And Jackson too. And Jackson, I think, was out for a while, and then they brought him back as well.
Yeah, as horrible as the Yankees were when in the quote Horace Clarke years, listen to this pitching staff. I have to remind myself, they had Fritz Peterson, Bonson, Stottlemyre, Downing, and one or two. Kekic at one time was a hell of a prospect. They were very decent pitching wise.
Downing, you know what? Downing, he kind of, when he got traded to LA, he was like, by then he was not like for some reason, something wasn't right with him. And and you know what? And for all we know, listen, the things that affect pitchers, even defense affects pitchers. I don't know if that was the case because Mel Stottlemyre was a ground ball pitcher and he thrived. But, Bonson was Rookie of the Year. Kekic was never – I think Kekic might have had one decent year, and I don't even know if it was with the Yankees. He was a top prospect, but never even really touched his projected potential. Listen, they just having Peterson and Bonson and Stottlemyre, those are 3 good starters. But the rest, there was just so many guys coming and going. Like Clark was solid. He was average. He wasn't a star. He wasn't as bad. He wasn't as bad as portrayed. Not at all. But like I say, but what I'm saying, and you had Bobby Mercer. But when when Horace Clark is one of the stars of your team, you don't have a very deep team.
Hey, but he wasn't. Roy White was decent. Like you say, Mercer was coming along. The guy who didn't really, Jake Gibbs, didn't really fulfill certainly his bonus potential. And that was a biggie because, hey, look, next time it took them a long time to come up with that Thurman Munson that really turned them around. My contention, you got to have a catcher and start from there to go anywhere.
A catcher or a shortstop. I mean, but yeah, you got, you want to start up the middle. But the thing is, too, didn't the draft start in like 66 or 67? So
65, I think.
65, there you go. So that, too, don't forget, the Yankees, like, everybody wanted to play for the Yankees, and the Yankees had the money to sign people. And yet, once the draft started, now they're on a kind of like a level playing field for scouting and picking talent. Like, you can't, you can't walk into any living room you want and offer a guy a contract, and most of them are going to say, "Oh yeah, I want to play for the Yankees." Having a level playing field for
Webb and Topping left the cupboard dry. So when CBS bought the team, the farm system by then had been so depleted that they knew, Webb and Topping knew they were going to sell and stop putting money into the farm system. And by the time they sold, left the Yankees at a tremendous disadvantage. Remember that they were pulling players out. They supplying the league with catchers year after year, and Woodling, and everybody they traded was terrific. So,
but the thing is, if it wasn't for the draft, they could have put money. CBS could have put money back into the farm system and said, "Okay, go out there and go sign them. Go sign them.
Yeah.
Tell them, ask them all if they want to play for the Yankees." So the fact of the matter is, now they had to build slowly from within, just like everybody else. It was, acquiring amateur talent. It became a level playing field. And I'm not saying it was unfair that the Yankees were able to do this. That was their persona. I mean, it's just the way it is. But, like I say, but once the rules changed, it became that much more difficult.
No question. What's the one thing about being a kid and rooting baseball-wise that you wish, was around today, the game, the atmosphere? What do you miss about being 12 and going to a baseball game that you can't get today?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know if there's anything I can't get. The only thing I don't get today that I got when I was 12 was being in awe of the stadium and the ball field. Because don't forget, growing up in New York City, we didn't have many grass ball fields. And the ones that we did were really crappy. New York City is not a place for for grass field, so to speak, athletics, with the exception of maybe Staten Island. And so the only thing that was different, like I say, was just the awe of like, wow, I'm at a baseball game. Man, look at the size of the stadium. Look at so many people here. Look at that field. It is so perfect, and I'm seeing these guys. But, I think though, when I watch the game today, it's quite possible I get more out of it because I have a much better understanding of it. Mm-hmm. So, it's
what is it that you know now and almost wish you didn't know?
Oh, I can't think of anything I wish I didn't know. But I have form, strategy, things like that. Base running.
What about the game and the way it's put together and the culture of the game, the way it's evolved as opposed to the way it was that you might miss?
I honestly, I know. In other words, like, are you referring to bat flips and fist pumps and things like that? I have no problem with that. I think it's fine. It is not something that if I played, even if I went out and played softball, it's not something that I could do, that I'm comfortable doing, but I have no problem with it. This is the exuberance that, and quite frankly, in my opinion, this is an exuberance that another culture brought to the game, that caught on. And quite frankly, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, I actually, I think they should have backflip contests, during the All-Star game. Like they have slam dunk contests.
How about this? Hit the bat boy and win $50.
Yeah, well, not really, but make the bat do a bat flip and make the bat do a trick, make it spin and do. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I just have no problem with players showing exuberance and being emotional and living and dying with it, as opposed to that. Because let's face it, okay. I'm sorry, I can't believe that back in the old days when a guy hit a home run, okay, and he's rounding the bases with his head down, acting ever so humble, you're going to tell me that inside he's feeling bad? He's like, oh man, I hit that home run. No, he wanted to bust out. If it was okay, you kidding me? He'd dance all around the bases. So it's just, to me, it was nothing but false modesty. So it was,
and not wanting to show up the pitcher because the next time up you could be plunked.
Exactly.
Or the next guy.
Yeah,
the next guy.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah. And and that's another thing when I think about, like, the unwritten rules and I used to buy into the unwritten rules. You know what? It's like, but as I got older, like, I realized these unwritten rules are like, socially penalizing somebody for trying to succeed in a game. Who the hell ever heard of that?
True. Hey, listen, the one question I'm going to ask you is in keeping with unwritten rules for being elected to the Hall of Fame. Should Schilling's political ideology, I say that in a nice way, in a neutral way, should that keep him out any more than Gary Carter's ideology helped get him in? I'll ask that question.
Okay. So, Well, I don't know if it was Gary Carter's ideology that got him in. I mean, if you look at
he's deserving, but it didn't hurt him particularly. It
didn't hurt him at all. Exactly. It didn't hurt him.
He wore his religious beliefs on his, on his heart. I'll give him credit for it.
You know what? I tell you what. Listen, I can't say that Gary Carter was, when you say he wore his religious beliefs, I don't think he was like Tim Tebow, and there's nothing wrong with Tim Tebow, and me personally, I have no problem with somebody listen, if they think that if someone is relating to what they're accomplishing and their talents and, and the results, and they're relating it, they're mixing it all in and relating it to God and talking about it, I got no problem with it. Isn't that, okay, but Gary Carter, to me, I can't say, I ever, listened to him talk and said to myself, oh my God, this guy's a religious nut. I'm sorry, he certainly came off as a real, he came off as a really good guy. Hey, this guy is too good, so to speak. But but there are people like that. Hey, listen, they're just nice. He wasn't rough around the edges, and he was a player and a gamer. So now, but getting back to Curt Schilling. So Curt Schilling, first of all, in the first place, Curt Schilling, to me, he's right on the line as far as being a deserving Hall of Famer. He's right on the line. You can, I look at some things and I'm like, yes, you can make an argument that, yes, he just gets over the line. And on the other hand, it's no, but, should his political views keep him out? Honestly, probably not, because, if you're going to keep him out, well, then you really, the next thing you need to do is you need to rip Cap Anson's plaque right off the freaking wall. Okay? Let's start with him. And there are many others. So, and listen, what about Bud Selig? I'm sorry, but I don't understand how he got into the Hall of Fame because he had a lot of influence, but he turned his head, he looked the other way.
All commissioners basically get in the Hall of Fame. Bowie Kuhn is in the Hall of Fame. Yeah,
so it's crazy, but not, but if you look at his body of work, look at the fiasco with Montreal, look at the fiasco with Miami, So one, the Montreal fiasco, and then approving, what was his name, Jeffrey Loria, to buy the Marlins, so John Henry can buy the Red Sox, and the way he used to cover for the Met owners, through, is so there's a lot of pieces of shit in the Hall of Fame. So you know what? If you think he's worthy, just based on his baseball exploits, yes. Okay. I don't agree with his political. I don't agree with his political agenda. But again, it's not. I haven't seen, unless I'm missing something. Okay. I haven't seen him call for. Well, I'll tell you. Here's the one thing. And
what are you talking about? You are missing something, then, Wayne, because
wait. I'll tell you
about
what.
stuff.
Wait. You know what? I'll tell you something though. One thing though that I got to say that, and he says it was a joke to me. When he had, what did he had some kind of T-shirt about hanging in sports writers or something? Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Something. It was something about sports writers to be hung or something. I mean that alone. So that that's a biggie. But
no, he's talking right now. He's talking QAnon stuff. That he's really making people a little scared. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well,
but he's coming close, and eventually he'll be in. But I mean, it's just I thought the analogy of now. I didn't see Gary Carter the way you did. I saw him continually mentioning God and stuff, continually in interviews, to the point where, God bless him, but I don't want to hear about it. I just want to hear about it.
You know what? But to be fair, Ralph, a lot of that has to do with your own personal views on religion. You and I know each other well, and a lot of that has to do with your own personal views. And
what doesn't?
But I'm just saying. But that's just something he's talking about. So that's something he's a believer and you're not, and that's all it is. I mean, hey, listen, Mariano Rivera is another one. That, I mean, when I think about it, there are just so many athletes today that say that, and they've been saying that for. I mean, when I think about it, now they've been saying, I've been hearing it for 40 years. I've been noticing. Oh yeah, I want to thank God all the time. And so what?
I don't know if you remember what they called the God Squad with the Giants. It was Lavelle and 2 or 3 others who formed a clique and would go over. They'd have Sunday morning meetings and this, that, and the other thing, but they formed a clique. And if you go back to the archives of Comfortably Zoned, I interview John DeQuisto on just that subject. And he talks about the devise it causes in a major league clubhouse. That's all. And I don't think Carter, I think he was at best sincere, and at worst, leave it home. I mean, Gil Hodges, or big Catholic, you'd hear about stuff, but it wasn't like it is today with these guys. Rivera was, always looking up. It's the whole concept of I'm going to the Super Bowl when I win. But when do you go to church? When you lose, that kind of thing. And I'd like to see more people go to church when they win. That's all. What can I tell you? And it isn't as simple as I'm not a believer. What I believe in has nothing to do with I don't show that. I don't write that on my sleeve. So I'm not the one that. Yeah. But the things that you do believe in, okay, you're very vocal about. Okay? You're on social media, you're very vocal about it. You talk about it. And
so this is something that he believes in, and you know what, like.
But you'd be surprised. I believe in the golden rule, which is similar to the Ten Commandments, but it doesn't say. So it's nothing. What is it that I believe in that I'm adamant about?
Well, because you seem to be adamant about, but what I'm saying is, but you see, that's not something you put out there a lot, okay? Where like, hey, I believe in this. You are adamant about other. To be fair, I've seen you like, say things about people who are overzealous about their religion or who are over-religious. Like, as long as they're not hurting anybody, okay, let it be.
That's very subjective right there.
Okay. Well, I mean, listen, I mean, it's, in other words, like, it's just, that's how somebody is. What about somebody who, well,
it may hurt people to exchange money. Exchange their money for your guidance. Thank you. In other words, and their guidance is sometimes hateful, because in the basement of these religious organizations, my cultural experience as well goes on in their basement over coffee and cake, goes on a lot of hateful talk, which is divisive. So so sometimes I'm right along those lines.
Well, there's, you know what, when you know what, I if you put a basement full of very, very left-leaning liberals sitting down and having coffee and cake, you know what? My guess is they're not going to say nice things about Republicans and conservatives.
Oh, no, they're not.
Okay, so, but in other words, but no, I don't know.
That's not the basement of the... Okay. That's not to say Jews are...
So in other words...
That's not to say the people in my basement, if I were in a basement of Jews, that there wouldn't be as many conservatives as there are liberals. So it's not necessary, but basically, liberalism, it's hard to be liberal. It's hard for me to be liberal and to combine traditional religion. So I have to find my spirituality elsewhere. That's all.
Listen, I think listen, I totally get it. I mean, me myself personally, I tell people I don't follow any organized religion. I tell them, I say, listen, if you are truly following the spiritual principles of your religion to the best of your ability, then we're on the same page. I just don't do it within something that's organized, and I leave it at that, So, and that's how it is. So if he's talking about it, then, if he's praising it, like, as long as he's living it, I can't say I've ever heard anything bad about Gary Carter.
Nothing bad about Carter.
I mean, exactly. I mean, they did say he did like the camera. He knew how to work the camera and things like that. I've heard that. But
people who know how to work the camera, people like Jeter and Rodriguez and Willie Mays.
Talk about people who work the camera. Do you know Kirk, that when he was a player, one of his nicknames for Kurt Schilling was Red Light Kurt, because he always knew when the red light on the video camera was on, and he knew to shine for that camera. He knew to do something for that camera.
Yeah.
He knew when the camera was on.
And it's amazing the attention that people like that Congresswoman supporting the Q and all that stuff, and Schilling get, and it's amazing how that kind of stuff still pleases Trump to this day. Retired as he's been, he'll be back, because there's a divide in this country that is worse than I ever thought it was. When you can go in, when you can support people, and 18 Capitol policemen were in on it. When you have enough people that don't automatically convict this guy, when they were there and witness to it, we got trouble in this country. It ain't going to go away just because Biden is president and, Trump's supposedly gone.
Yeah, well, you're drifting off from baseball.
I know.
So
that's how life. That's how life goes. That's how podcasting goes.
And when I was 12 years old, the two biggest issues in this country were civil rights. Even though the Civil Rights Act was passed, but it was still an issue, a huge issue, and the Vietnam War. Those were the two issues those were the two political issues when I was 12.
And they now seem to fade in people's memories how heavy that was. You live near Junction Boulevard, and you remember the divide and the busing and all that stuff.
Oh, so, absolutely. I mean, I was kind of like, and I tell you what, I was totally clueless and naive about it, and because my mother didn't really, to me it was like no big deal. All I know is that like when I went to 5th grade, all of a sudden like the demographic of my school had changed, and I had no idea why. I mean, I just heard that there were people that used to go to PS 92 coming to my school. I had no idea what had just happened, and didn't really give it much thought. I showed up. I went to school. I mean, I was a smart kid, but I wasn't like a hard worker, and I was a bit of a smart ass. And
hey, don't be modest. You got into one of the three special high schools, Brooklyn Tech, and you earned your way into that scholastically. So you did something, Wayne.
I passed the test. I was good at taking. I still am. I'm good at multiple choice tests. That's basically what it was. They did not look at my marks or anything. It was a test, but thank you for the compliment. But basically, like, I went to school and did my thing at school, and like, it was just more kids to play punch ball with in the yard. That's what we used to do during recess when we were outside. So that was just all I knew. I had no idea that we were in the midst of this whole big busing thing, and I mean, and it wasn't so much what they did is they kind of like rezoned things. So they had everybody from one grade to another, one grade to lower grades go to one school, and the upper grades go to this school, and that's how they were balancing it out. But like I say, I didn't really notice. I knew the demographics had changed. I mean, that was plain as day. But it was like I didn't give it much thought, and because my mother, it was like, yeah, you can go to school. Like it is what like I don't know. It didn't move her because that's things like that never moved her. She was just she always judged people on the asshole factor. So,
all right. Hey, I just wanted to note something else. We lived in developments right across the street from yours, from each other. Northridge was where I grew up, and Southridge, which was where you grew up, and was built over. You mentioned grass fields before, Aces Field, which was where Billy Lowe's and Whitey Ford played at one time when they played Sandlot Ball. I know Billy Lowe's played in Elm Jack. Whitey Ford was from next door in Astoria. So their building Southridge took away my grass field, which was right across the street on Northern Boulevard. So
wow,
there you go.
And it's funny.
Yeah.
So you know what? In the later years, we were separated. Northridge and Southridge were separated by Northern Boulevard, which is a pretty busy street. It was a main thoroughfare.
Right.
And
you did not go,
so when I was
a kid, you didn't go across.
You weren't allowed to cross.
Right.
So I used to, even though I was closer to 90th Street Park by PS 148, I didn't go there. I used to go to 149 Park, which was a few blocks away, because I didn't have to cross Northern Boulevard. I can cross the little streets. And so, but 149 Park definitely had a much bigger baseball, really more softball field, because it was concrete, than 148 did. But you know what? And to think about that, we at least had that. All those things were taken away by the overcrowding in the neighborhoods and the need for more space at schools. So they built annex buildings. So like so much of 149 Park of that field is gone because they built annex buildings. Where we went to junior high school, Joseph Pulitzer, almost that whole yard is gone with annex buildings, and just so many others throughout the city. So, kids after us lost what they had too.
Hey, where I live now in Alameda, where I raised my kid, there are 12 grass parks in the little city of Alameda. Big parks, too. Just a different way of growing up. I'm glad I grew up in New York, but would have been nice to be more countrified along the way. No regrets.
Listen, I look at the schools where I'm in Oviedo, and so Oviedo actually has, has two high schools in Oviedo and one right on the borderline that Wyatt goes to, and they all have baseball fields, football fields, track. They got nice gyms. I mean, athletics are a big deal. It's there's actually from the immediate area, there's a lot of ball players that have come from this immediate area. A whole lot of ball players. So they you got the facilities. I mean, when you think about it, so a guy like Lee Mazzilli, okay, the fact that he was able to play enough, and he had to have been really talented, because, like I say, he didn't have the competition that nor the length of season that other high schools in other parts of the country have. Another guy, talk about a guy who didn't have high school ball at all is Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo, he played on Sandlot Ball and stuff. There's no high school baseball. He's from Wyoming, right? No high school baseball. Right.
And they're saying now that kids who are pitchers who grow up in cold weather areas where they're not playing much, their arms are preserved. So a lot of them are better off.
Matt Harvey, Connecticut? Nah.
Yeah. Bad example, but there are people from North Dakota and what have you.
Yeah.
That.
No, I know what you're saying. I'm you know what? I'm curious about that. You know, now that you bring that up, I'm sure there's a list of pitchers that have had Tommy John surgery. I wonder if there's enough biographical information on any one particular list where you can kind of see where they grew up and kind of see like, hey, you know, did they grow up in a warm weather climate where they were pitching more and year round? So right. I'm curious about that. But anyway. Hey, Ralph,
what a great podcast, going back to when you were 12, and we, for the most part, kept politics out of it.
Yeah, I you know me, it's like, politics, you know, how can I, all right, so today I was talking with somebody, and a local gentleman. I passed by a garage sale. Guy was selling tools and stuff, and you know, so I stopped to ask if he's got cameras. And somehow we're just talking about so much stuff, and he mentioned politics, and I just said, listen, and forgive my expression, but I had to put it this way to him to make my point. I said to him, listen, I said, to me, all politicians are cunts. Okay? I said, I don't care where you know, what party they align with, that's what they are. And he just, you know, and it was good because you know what? It stopped him dead in his tracks. I really didn't want to hear what he had to say because he certainly had his own agenda and narrative. And it didn't sound like he had a very open-minded one. And, you know, I wasn't going to argue with him, but I didn't want to listen to it either. So,
okay, I got to laugh. I got to laugh. I was watching a Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, and Larry used the expression that, like you did, at a little card game, and people got very offended by that word. I would prefer that word to a lot of words, but they're going out the car. He said, called the guy a cunt for not raising another person for the pot, and everybody got offended, and they asked him to leave, and that was it. And he goes out to the car, and he says, should have said pussy. So,
I mean, but the thing is, like, I did qualify saying, like, I use that word because I wanted to make a point to this. You know, in other words, like, it's not a word that I use. It really isn't. But I just had, you know, I needed. You know, I don't, you know, like, as opposed to like, yeah, they're all crooks. Yeah, they all don't give a crap about. Mm-hmm. I really needed, I needed a word. You know, you have to understand this is a guy that, you know, a good old Florida boy, and who grew up in Florida when Florida was still the good old South. And, you know, and
Thursday,
there
you mean? Are you talking about last Thursday?
Yeah. No, let me tell you something. So not far from where I live, but like in the greater Orlando area, like I have learned that there were like some really, you know, typical, you know, Southern, you know, many actually, typical Southern racial injustices done over the years. There was the Akoi 5, and it had to do with voting and registration. There was something that happened a gazillion years ago in Groveland where my oldest son used to live, and this woman accused some of these black men of raping her, and I think they got lynched. And, like, you know, so things like this, you know, so these things have been brought up. And this woman who did this, I forget when it happened, but I think she is still alive. She's a very, very old woman. But the thing with the Akoi 5, I mean, these 5 guys were killed and probably lynched. I don't remember exactly the details of the story, but it all had to do with voting rights and voting. And so there was, like I say, so when I say, like, so this guy grew up there, and, you know, like, you could just tell, you know, he's a good old boy, you know.
But you know what? There's overt and covert prejudice, and we grew up in New York, and there's a lot of covert prejudice going on.
Absolutely, and still does, okay?
So, I know a lot of Southern people, both from Facebook and from real life, who are just that they're not necessarily liberal, but there's nothing wrong with being conservative. You don't just accept that, you know, we should be becoming more progressive is all. And I think the word socialism threw a lot of people, scared a lot of people. And, you know, vaccines are socialism.
But I think the word conservative scares people on the other side. People, you know, conservatives were really, it really wasn't so much in what, you know, it wasn't really so much about the perceived form, the form that people perceive it to be. It was really more about being fiscally conservative. Okay?
No, I agree with you there. Right.
So, you know, like I say, so it's like so much of the labels are perception. And
no question.
So,
but this woman with the Q party, that's not perception. It's getting to the point where there are a bunch of crazies in power. And even those that aren't in power now were and still are to a certain extent. But, you know, to bring Trump back into it, his genre is not dead.
Okay. Listen, how long was Strom Thurmond a senator? 50 years?
Yeah. And
okay. So this
was it not Biden who was going across the aisle to talk to these people and negotiate with them going on? I will say one thing about Biden. His first, 2 weeks in office, it's a breath of fresh air. Just a human being. I'm not a Biden guy. I wanted Bernie, who's a little bit more progressive. He has surprised me. He is doing great. If eventually they can do something about health care so that, as you mentioned on Facebook when I said there was 80% of the bankruptcies are caused by people getting, you know, with insurance sometimes having to pay. It's only 66%. 66% of people our age sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
And that is a big blight on our country, that people can work all their lives and lose everything at the end.
Well,
that's
you know what?
disgusting.
It's something though. Here's something I learned. Okay, I actually learned this from my brother. He told me that. So let's say you're 70 years old and you own a home. Okay. And so what you can do is you can sell that home, and you can buy rental property. You can buy another property and use it, buy it as an investment property, and then you go live somewhere, and you'll pay rent. You go live. But the thing is, so let's just say your medical expenses get so bad, and you have to go on Medicaid, like. they cannot. So if you own a home and you have to go on Medicaid, you exhaust all your money and you go on Medicaid and you own a home, they won't take you home. But when you pass and your heirs sell the home, Medicaid is going to get they get first dibs off the top of the proceeds. But if it's a rental property, they can't touch it. If it's an investment property, they can't touch it.
Yeah, but how do you keep your proceeds? They'll get your proceeds before they start paying you. If you had medical bills, you had sold your home, you're renting, and you're using the money to live.
But
you can't get on Medicaid if you have assets. Am I right?
No, you can. I forgot how they do it, but you can. In other words, you can. They're not going to make you sell that asset. In other words, because that's like money that you need. You've exhausted all your money. You don't have the money to pay for this medical care. So I'm not. Listen, I'm not a Medicaid expert, but basically, so the money that you're getting from the investment property is just going to pay your rent. In other words, but you don't have so once you exhaust your money in the bank, okay, you then have to. That's when you can say, hey, I don't have money to pay my medical bills.
Is this the kind of stuff that should be going through a senior's mind? I exhausted this, and I don't have money for this, because
this is well. I'll tell you what. Any senior who owns a home, who has any kind of assets, should, without a doubt, okay, go to definitely see an elder planning attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
In California, you can homestead your home. It's different in every state, but you're absolutely right.
You can homestead here too. You can homestead here too, but I don't know if it protects you. But so they won't take Medicaid, won't take it. But when you sell it, they're entitled to the proceeds. So there's a difference, and some states have, and as far as transferring it over to another family member, some states have it's a certain amount of time. I think New York, it's either 5 years or 7 years. So let's just say, your father owns a home, and it's like, hey, listen, he's, we can see this is happening. You know what? Sign the home over to me, so this way you can say you don't have it. But in other words, once you have to start drawing on Medicaid, if 5 years had not passed since you signed over the home, guess what? They can grab it. It's either 5 or 7. I think it's 5. I think it used to be 3 and it went up to 5. So, so like when they were making a big deal about the estate tax some years ago. Oh man, you say, let me tell you something. Rich people, they don't pay estate taxes. Their heirs don't pay estate taxes. You know why?
Okay.
Because they have attorneys and they know to put things in trusts and things like that. It's the little guy in the states where people aren't protected. It's the little guys that get hammered.
I couldn't get in. It took me forever to get in.
Okay, Wayne. Listen, what a terrific podcast. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I'll talk to you soon, man.
I'm glad we got to talk about when we were 12, what it was like. And because it's podcast and because it's us, we got onto other things, made it very interesting for me. And a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here, Ralph. You have a good night.
All right. Say hi to Wyatt and Skylar, and you're blessed,
Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Be well. Thanks for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Lovin' baseball when we were 12 and innocent. Adios.